is to do for you the lecture on basically the psychology of design and how people perceive things and operate. Okay. And I originally created this in Flash, which now there is no more Flash anymore, but I'll explain to you what happens in actually in, sorry. The cool thing is that in PDF, I can draw on the slides as we go, so that'll be good. So the first thing I want to talk about is Gestalt and the idea of how we perceive images and we give them meaning. And I start this out with the whole idea of the stars in the heavens and the fact that what are actually in every way random dots in the sky, we give meaning to, and we give stories to what goes on in the sky. I know that these stories are told, and these particular constellations you see right here in the night sky, this is the Greek version. I know that there are Hebrew versions, there are Jewish versions. Do you guys have specific names for constellations in the sky? I don't know about the Arab tradition. And are there stories associated with these stars? You can tell me in the chat or you can speak up. I'd be happy either way.
I think there are names, but I'm not really sure. And I don't know about the stories.
Okay, because certainly we definitely use the North Star to navigate, and we use the Southern Cross in the Southern Hemisphere to navigate and those sorts of things. But then we look into the stars, and the thing that this represents is the idea that as humans, we just have this tendency to give things meaning, whether that meaning is intended, whether that meaning's there or not. So even when I was a kid, if we look here, okay, with Orion, Orion in the Northern Hemisphere, or at least in California, is in the Western sky. And I would look out my window every night when I went to bed, and if the sky was clear, I could see Orion, and it's Orion's belt. And as you can sort of see, you can see how it might be a person if we put a head on it, etc. And Orion is the archer, kind of obviously. And then we also can see actually the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper. And so that's weird. Okay, which are also, Ursa means bear. So this is what I call this, the Big Dipper. Okay, and why the Dipper's not here for the Little Dipper, I'm not sure. Okay, so then there's stories about the hunter. There's all the stars of the zodiac. So you see, here's Cancer. Here's, okay, Cassiopeia is the queen, and she's a W. Let's see. Aries, Pisces. I mean, if we look at this, sort of this is Pisces, and that's that star. There's a whole bunch of other ones. So there's all kinds of animals, dragons, you name it. Actually, the Chinese constellations are viewed differently as well. So, and there's more stories. But as human beings, we like to take random events or objects and apply meaning to it. And if we don't understand, or if the message is not completely clear, that is when we rely more on sort of these instincts. And what Gestalt theory is really a starting point for this. And basically what the theorists say is we don't even think about it. We just automatically perceive things. There's some rules, there's some laws, and I think you'll get some of them. So the precepts are what happens before. So the precepts are where this starts. So when you guys look at those dots, Okay, before you read what's on the left, what do you guys see? Do you see anything in that mess of dots? You can write it in the chat or you can say it, either one. Do you see anything in this square? Okay, so this is a random series of black marks and white space. What do you see in the picture?
I think a garden, sir.
A garden?
Yeah, I think.
Okay. Anybody else? Tell me what you see.
Sir, it looks like a park in like a
Definitely.
salon.
Yeah, maybe like in fall or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is very interesting because in teaching here at Zayed University, you guys, over that time, very few students see what I see as a Westerner, and actually Gestalt, by virtue of its name, came from Germany. And they say that it's natural, but I think there's learned parts to it. Because what we see and what I've written over here, okay, now that I've put a circle around it, do you see the dog? Yeah. Okay. Did you see it before? Okay. So from the west, it's a dog walking toward, I agree. I think this looks like a tree. It looks like leaves, but that, okay, essentially, they assume that you would perceive this Dalmatian dog and you would see the shape within random spots. Now, culturally, I know a good number of you do have dogs and things like that, but my impression is that dogs are not as sort of valued or loved. I mean, beyond a Saluki, et cetera. So maybe your experience of life and your experience of what's going on here, you don't necessarily see the dog. But it is the idea that from those dots, emergence, that we see pictures, we give meaning to these otherwise fairly random objects. Next, and I'm going to give you 7 examples of this, is reification. And that is where, okay, constructive or generative aspect of perception, we see something that's not there. Does everybody, all right, maybe you guys, I guess you could raise hands. Do you guys see the triangle?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, the raise hands. All right. So people can see the triangle. All right, I've got your names out here now. I can, if you want. So only Shamsa is with me at this moment. Okay. I know this is not the way to do it, but if I don't get more reactions, I'm going to do attendance again. So,
With you.
okay. So if everybody knows that you can do reactions, okay. All right, just making sure. So you can see the triangle, but do you see, there we go, thank you. Okay, do you see that the triangle's not there? The triangle has not been drawn. You are imagining it, okay? In essence, what is there are 3 Pac-Men, you know, coming at each other. But the idea of reification is if we can complete it, we do complete it. Okay, so there we see a triangle. Here, if everybody can see it, I don't know if I'm blocking your view or not. Do you guys see the C?
I can see it.
Okay. Do you see the sea serpent?
Yeah.
That it's like,
Yeah, it looks like a Loch Ness monster. Yeah.
Exactly. Which is why possibly that very famous photograph of the Loch Ness Monster could just be shadows. Because there's sort of a line here. We imagine the water, we imagine
Wow.
this big
That just
snake,
clicked in my mind, sir.
okay, that goes up and down. So in that photo, we apply meaning where it doesn't have to exist. It can just be shadows. And we see the Loch Ness Monster. Very good. All right. So this one, do you see the pole? It's sort of a worm wrapped around a pole. Because,
Yes, oh my God.
okay, it's not really there. All right. So what you got to have to think about is sometimes, like when you're using a photograph and when you bring images together, there's a possibility that if you're not clear with your meaning, that people will apply meaning, or you can use this to your advantage and be creative with it, but also it could work against you because people will see something that you had no intention to show them. Okay. So the spiky ball, I mean, the ball's not there at all.
Yeah, not there, sir.
It's
But
not
it
there
looks
at all.
there.
But we see it. I mean, it's like you can sort of see it coming. All right. Now this is a logo from Hong Kong that uses this idea and to create what's not there, etc. And actually, this is for the electric company. It's China Light and Power. And this is one of the coolest all-time logos I've ever seen because it's C, L, and P. Okay. And it is the Chinese symbol for the word China. But what we also see is once I say China Light and Power, because of these curved lines, it almost makes it like a pole. Do you see that? It's like it, and it's like a power pole. And it totally connects with this. It takes something that's two-dimensional and gives it life. You don't always see two languages in one place, which is why this is one of my top 5 favorite all time. And it is using this precept of reification and making it look like a pole, and just it's super creative and interesting. Okay? Everybody knows what that's for, right?
Maybe Coca-Cola.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's Coca-Cola.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. It's not a difficult quiz. The point is, it's not. And we see the bottle, but the bottle's not there. And we just have one side of it. And there is recognition of that bottle shape that we know is Coca-Cola. There is recognition of the red color. When we see those things together, probably even if we just saw the shape, I should probably do another one and take that shape and just kind of put it there. You're probably still going to see a Coke bottle. So there are some things that we learn, and there are some things that we just kind of see. So this involves a combination of those things. Okay. And then finally, this is one you're far less familiar with, but can you see the peacock? So, and,
Yeah.
huh? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Because what they did, okay, so this is the head, the nose of the peacock. So they did the peacock, so gosh, they did the peacock feathers, and actually they didn't align them specifically, but it's aligned in a way that it's like there's a body here, and there's the head. And 50 years ago, this logo was very literally a peacock, and it's for NBC television. And the reason they created it is they were the first people in the US to broadcast color television. So it has all the colors of the rainbow. So it's a peacock. Peacocks are colorful. And it goes with things. But this uses reification to create this peacock in a very subtle abstract way, but we see it, or when we discover it, we like it. Yes, exactly, Maha, exactly. And that's why, yeah, it is that thing in operation. They functionally did things in designing it on purpose to get you to see it. All right. So that's reification. And it's just showing you ways it can be used. Now, this is called multi-stability. And the question becomes, okay, do you see the faces or do you see the vase or the chalice, the drinking cup?
The vase, sir.
Okay. All right. So you see the vase. Can you adjust your vision? And the idea of multi-stability, okay, the tendency of ambiguous perceptual experiences is to pop back and forth unstably between two or more alternative interpretations. Now, I've seen this so many times that a lot of, and once again, I'm going to have 7 examples, but I've seen it so many times that I pop back and forth maybe a little more easily. Have any of you ever been to the Dubai Museum of Illusions? Anybody?
No.
Okay. Because I think I haven't been there either, but from the things I've seen they post online, is a lot of their illusions are actually the Gestalt at work. So things like this. So multi-stability. And you can switch if you can focus on the white, you can see 2 faces. If you focus on the black, which sort of jumps out at us immediately, I think for most people, you see the chalice or the vase. Okay? This one, okay? It's like everybody kind of sees a box.
Yes.
Okay? But which way is it pointing? And if you really stare at it a long time, it becomes 2-dimensional and it's just block, triangle, triangle, parallelogram there. I just changed the direction it's pointing by adjusting my point of view. So the box can be pointing in different directions. It actually can be 2-dimensional, but our brains can move between a whole bunch of different interpretations of these lines. Okay? Duck or bunny? Play along. Okay, bunny, Shamsa sees the bunny.
I see a bunny as well.
Okay, so actually I've seen this at a Ripley's museum and they actually had like a crank so you could turn it. If you turn it a little bit, then you'll see the duck more. So obviously there's the bunny and the bunny's ears are kind of short. But if you look here, the eye is shared by both. But when we change the ear and think of that as a duck bill, then we can see the duck and then the foot becomes the tail. So
That's actually true.
huh?
That's actually true.
Yeah. So once we look at it, we can lock on one, but then as we look at it more, we can see that it's unstable and more things can be seen. So it's just how our brain is looking and perceiving. When I look at this one, I think I most easily first see the woman, and then I see the dude with the saxophone. Okay. Amina, I will put this PDF or a smaller version of this PDF up, but it's also, I'm taping this, so you'll be able to look at it again. Okay. Yeah, it kind of has that vibe. It kind of has a Maryland vibe. But do you see the guy playing the saxophone in the black part on the left side? Mom. Okay. Yeah, so you go between the two. So yes, it's that kind of shows you, see now you're applying a perception and wanting to give it meaning. And it also there are classic shapes of faces that we consider beautiful, and certainly Marilyn possessed those in the attributes of her face. So I can see why you would see that. Okay, this is the one you guys have seen a million times. I think it's the one most often seen. Is it the old woman or the young woman? I've even seen they add a line or two and it becomes a third person. So old,
Both, sir. A old woman and a young woman.
okay. So for the old woman, she's looking down in this direction, and the young woman is kind of more facing that way, right?
Yeah, sir. Yeah.
Okay, so that's just, that's multi-stability. That's showing us something there, that this feather becomes a decoration, and for both of them, this is kind of the hat, but it's whether this down here is a choker or the older woman's mouth, and then either one of them looks like they come from a cold environment. All right, so that this one also has that multi-stability as well. Obviously why I love it. Okay, now this is also one of my top 5 logos. It's not used anymore. Does anybody remember this or know what it's for? Okay. Okay, this is for, the airline was originally called Northwest Orient, and then it became known as Northwest Airlines. So if there's multi-stability in it, so everybody sees the circle, everybody sees the N, right?
Oh, I thought it was a W.
And it is a W as well, for sure.
Okay.
The chunk is taken out. So depending, you will see the N or the W first, right? So you see the W, then you can see the N. Now, I love this logo because the time I've spent in airports, I like looking at logos and things. And I always love this because over time, I discovered more things in it. And those are always the best. And one of the things as I looked at it, the N and the W are definitely multi-stability. But there's one more thing that makes this pure genius. And I can say to you, in Hong Kong, I actually got to meet the guy who designed this. And I got to be a fanboy, a strange sort of fanboy of a designer. And he appreciated that I love this logo. Okay. I'm a fanboy of architects and logo designers and things like that. I was at Sheikh Nahyan's Majlis, and actually I met the architect who made Zayed University in Abu Dhabi, the campus. And I love it. And it was great to talk to him and tell him how great his work was. I don't think he hears that every day. But looking at this, okay, does it seem a little odd to anyone that it's not positioned in the middle, that it's sort of up and over? That's a little weird, right?
Yes.
Okay, why would they do that? Because of this triangle. Can you tell me what direction that triangle is pointing?
Down.
No. Okay, yeah, that's possible. Yeah.
Oh, north, like north.
West,
Oh, really?
because there's west,
Oh, okay, because it's a
there's
W.
north. So it's pointing northwest.
Okay, that's actually north.
Okay, I love it. Okay, and I love that you saw it. Okay, because it can be pointing down, but it's one of those things that as you look at it, it comes to you. Actually, they've come up with a new logo, which I hate. And the only thing they kept from this logo was the arrow pointing up to the corner. And actually, they now call the airlines NWA. Okay, are you serious? That's what you call your airline. Okay. I don't know if anybody likes old school rap music, but NWA, right? The word I can't say with attitude. What? Okay. All right. We'll press on. All right. So then there's also the idea in our perception of invariance. And that's the fact is you can take an object, so this is the object, and you can twist it, turn it, you can change the outline. We do have the capacity that once we imagine an object to be something, we maintain our knowledge of it. So even you could think about the letter E flipped around or backwards, or letters of the alphabet. And you can do a lot of things in design as long as it is recognizable, sorry. Okay. That we, invariance, we will hold it. So now let's look at the laws of Gestalt. And if we look at those laws, okay, these are things that occur, all right? So this one is pragnance, meaning good figure. And it's the law of simplicity. So we see that objects in the environment are seen in a way that makes them as simple as possible. So making that as simple as possible, it kind of becomes an arrow pointing down to the left. So that's the simplest object, is that this is a simple arrow pointing to the left. We don't automatically say, oh, square triangle. Our brain simplifies. So when you make something complex, even if you have a photographic scene, the angles, all the different things will connect with one another, and that's what we will see. So that's the law of pragnance, simplicity. Then there's similarity. So we look at this, and the black dots are grouped together and the white dots are grouped together. So it's almost like they're separate units. And so it's two groups of three rather than 6 individual lines or things like that. And when we focus on the black, it groups the black and then the white with the outline. Okay, so that is a similarity. Things that are similar will be seen together, will be understood together. Okay, proximity, things that are closer together are seen to be in a group. So we've got this grid, that's a group, but here we have 3 groups of 2 columns, right? So because of their closeness together, they're understood to be together, okay? This is, okay, this is, I can't zoom into it, or can I? But this is Escher, and it is the idea of that I love Escher things, but let me see how far I can zoom into this. Let's go. Yeah, I can, there we go. And this is something that operates in Photoshop, is actually proximity. Because at the essence of this image, and actually it's also true in Photoshop, can you guys see that this image is dots? Okay, that's all it is. It is the proximity of those colored dots to each other, which is how we see color, which is how we see shapes. Because when we really dive into it, whoops, that's not what I wanted. Wait, let me change my tool. Okay, that is what happens. Okay, Photoshop works exactly the same way. If you zoom way in, it is about individual dots. It is actually our brains that have us see a picture. Okay, so that's what operates there. Escher is one of those guys, if you've seen many Escher things, he really messes with our perception and our understanding. Everything really is about perception. Okay, so this is an example. Let's see if I can play it, because it's not a video. But when we look at video, what we actually see is a series of still pictures. We are not watching motion. We, by connection of those images, their proximity, the speed at which movement is shown greatly affects whether we connect it or not. So that's why this will be a little weird, but let me try. Okay, now I've gone too many. So I have to move kind of slow. So I move a bit slowly. And you can get the perception when that runs at a minimum of 15 frames per second, then we see motion. So video, film, digital recordings, we see motion because of the fact of the distance between those images. It is a series of still images. So that goes to back in the day. So let's also look at symmetry. So what I'm trying to show you here, that even if they're not super close together, okay, if two things are symmetrical, in this case, it's really more reflexivity, but they're reflective of one another, but they are similar. They are symmetrical, that you can see the black shapes and you can see the white shape in the middle that they create. So like the three Pac-Men with the triangle, whereas this one, that in-between shape, because those two, the two sort of bookends are not symmetrical, it's harder to see a shape between them. They become divided into their own worlds. Okay, then we have continuity, and that's really shown here that we tend to follow the line, we don't turn. So in this case, we either fall, if we start on the bottom left or the upper right, we follow the diagonal, and then we don't really turn, okay? Or if we start on on the curved line, we follow the curved line, whether it's right or left. I would argue that you guys tend to start on the right side, whereas I tend to start on the left side. Anybody want to tell me why? Why would I start on the left and you start on the right? Come on. Anybody? Okay, because I learned to read English, and English starts on the left.
No, yeah, you're right. I didn't think about it like that.
Okay, because reading is also a visual activity. And this is one of those cultural things that even though they say, the theorists say, who are Western people living in a Western world, that this is how people do it, not all people do it that way. I guess it's my 10 years in China, in Hong Kong, and now 10 years here, I see that you see things differently. And I would say it comes from our languages, how we learn to read. We also read images, we read pictures. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So, okay, so I will move along here. So that's continuity. Then we have closure. You don't have to see everything to perceive that it's closed. So you see a circle, you see a rectangle, right? Our brains close things in the same way, okay? This looks like a Japanese flag. What I can do when I interact, I can move it around. You can push objects to the edge of the frame, and I'll show that to you in another context. It makes a difference that if I move this circle to the bottom left or to straight to the left, if I allow enough of the object, then it allows people's brains to see the rest of it. So like Escher, I think he's coming next, okay? You don't have to see his entire face to know that he has a head, there's more of him there, we close the rest of the body, even though he hasn't drawn it. And he has cut it off at a very nice place. So that's what happens. I've got another interactive one. This one, I can show cutoff lines. I'll do that in the Photoshop tutorial, just so you can, or in the Illustrator tutorial, I think I'll show it, so that you can see Guan Yin here. She's actually one of the primary goddesses in Chinese Buddhism, and she's the goddess with 1,000 arms. So she's as close as they come to what we think of it as God. And it's because she's got 1,000 arms and all kinds of functions. But when you see that whole photograph, you'll understand that a little better. Sorry. It used to be interactive, but it's not in PDF. Okay, so there, once again, okay, closure, the bottle's not there, but we see it because the hints are there. So we close it and see the bottle. Then there's the notion of common fate. And this is one of those things that also, that things that are moving together. So naturally, when we look at this as a still image, the 4 black dots are connected together by similarity, but because of proximity, these guys might be more connected, but if we do similarity and proximity, these 2 guys are closer together, and this one's the odd man out. But if it moves, once they move together, we see common fate, and we see them as a group. So the example I have here is example from nature, okay? How zebras survive in the African savanna, in the veldt, is by the fact of their stripes. And when the way they can keep predators away is when they're all together in a group, they look like one giant beast. Because when they move and they move together, the perception of the lion or the hyena or whoever the predator is that that's a big thing that they don't want to mess with, because common faith, they're together. That's why I don't know if you guys watch these kind of videos, if one breaks away, that's the one that's going down. Because then all of a sudden, the predator says, wait a minute, there's a small one. Whether it's actually a calf or a baby, or if it's even just a single zebra, when it breaks off, that's something manageable. But that giant body with the stripes creating confusion, and then them moving and sweeping together, they don't want any of that. That's too big an opponent. But once a little piece breaks off, so it actually does operate in nature. Okay, so that's the idea of common fate. So those are the basics of Gestalt. And so I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, and I'm going to pause for just a minute. So we're recording again. Now I'm going to talk. We'll see how long this one takes, but I'm going to talk about the ideas behind image composition. So this is going to rely on a bunch of things we've already talked about. Okay, this is going to rely on some things we've already talked about, and hopefully we'll be able to see that and you'll be able to understand it. So when we look at image composition, I did talk about this before, so I don't have to spend a lot of time with it, but we have horizontal, which is the x-axis, vertical, okay? So let's just, okay? X-axis, y-axis, z-axis, okay? And with the z-axis, it's seen as a diagonal, which it can be, but it also means in and out of the frame, if you remember my big hand coming toward the camera. Okay, so in and out of the frame. So when we look at an image that is predominantly an x-axis image, which this is, okay? Actually, a lot of things in China, because they're old and conservative, it's very horizontal, okay? This is the important line, is that horizontal line. It gives it stability. It gives it mass. It's unmovable, unchangeable. It's, you know, thousands of years of history. So we see that. And if you have an image that is very strong on the horizontal, it will be very stable. It has the potential to be a little boring. Okay. Even here, this is 3 levels up, but there's very little, ooh, that might fall over kind of thing. So that is an x-axis oriented image. Now, next, when we think of the vertical city, and I'm using it in terms of architecture, so this is strong y-axis. This is strong this is strong y-axis. All right, it's all here, and that's what makes New York a place like New York. It's less exciting from this angle, but when you're in it, everything's vertical. Now, when something moves to the y-axis, like trees, buildings, super tall, skinny people, okay, they have the potential for movement. They have the potential for moving to the diagonal. So it's a little more dramatic. It's more exciting than the horizontal. It's not as exciting as it could be, but it creates the opportunity, the potential for movement. So those are things dominantly on the on the y-axis. In fact, when you do a poster and you do it vertically in portrait mode, where the height is longer than the width, that gives you the opportunity to be more vertical. A horizontal poster where the width is longer than the height tends towards stability. You have to fight against it to get a little more action in it, okay? And then finally, when we see the y-axis here, which I'm showing, this is Frank Gehry modernist architecture. It's the Disney Concert Hall. And there's so many diagonal lines and things in it. It just seems a little wild. How many of you guys are moms? Or just have little ones somewhere around you?
Sir, being an aunt for 13 children,
Huh?
can I be considered as a mom?
Well, if you're taking care of a lot of kids,
Yeah.
okay. Because what I want to do, I want to use this just as an illusion for a second, is that if we think of these in terms of a baby, okay, when a baby is very small, it doesn't move, it lies, and it starts to crawl, right? And it's very stable. We're not terribly worried for that baby. We really just want the baby to start moving so that we know the baby's okay. Okay, so that's horizontal. Can't really get into any trouble and all those sorts of things. Then what happens is a baby learns to pull up, right? So they learn to pull up on things. They become vertical. Now, number one, we're worried that they're going to slobber on tables, but then we start to worry, oh, that child could fall over, they could hurt themselves, they could hit their head on the table, whatever, because now they're vertical. When they were horizontal, you know, they really weren't motoring too much. When they're vertical, they can fall, they become a little more exciting. And then the point is, when they learn to walk, they're diagonal. Because in essence, walking, and then running even more so, is a process of controlled falling. And our bodies start to be on the diagonal. When you think about it, when you think of a baby, when they start to walk, what they do is they start to fall forward, then they put their leg out in front of them. And once that leg catches them, it's like, It's walking, and then they do it with the other leg and the other leg. And if you think of someone running, it's very much, if you think of Usain Bolt, if you think of very fast runners, they mostly run at an angle. So, and then once babies can walk and move, then we're nervous all the time because there's all this motion. There's all this trouble they could get into. And there's all these different things because now they're mobile. So we can put some of that and think about it in some of our photographs when they're, and posters and designs. When there's more diagonal, there's more potential for action. Okay, so now let's look at composition. And these are 3 comic strip compositions. And let me take the sketches off. Okay, and this is just the idea. There are a number of ways that people perceive how we look at images, and I mentioned it there, talking about right and left. But there's also theories that when we look at an image, we start here. And in effect, whoops, that's not the right tool. Okay, that in effect, we look in a spiral, and these compositions actually drive us in this way. So if we start this image here, which is what the theory tells us, we come over here and it's like Lily. We see the mom and she's looking over here. We see the teddy bear and the made bed, and then we're drawn here with an open window. So then we become nervous. What's the rest of the story? Then we take in the rest of the composition and say, it's a small child's room because the alphabet around the top. The various toys are a small child. There's even a strange gumball machine over here. Okay? If we think of composition in that way. In the same way, if we look here, okay, and we start, so where we essentially start is with the speech bubble. Here it comes. Our view comes around, and then actually the power of the eyes and the arms and all those forces drawing us, then we look out that way. Okay, well, that's not totally straight. It should probably be over here. We're looking. One of the most absolutely powerful things, and I think I've said this to you before, in an image are eyes, human eyes, animal eyes. By virtue of how we've evolved, developed, grown, looking at eyes are very important. It tells us what's important. It tells us about the person. But if they're looking somewhere else, it's telling us maybe we better look in that direction. If it's an animal of some kind, we better look in those eyes to see what the heck's going on and maybe what that animal's looking at. So eyes are hugely important. The direction of eyes. If somebody points, we look in that direction. It's natural, it's human. And this, because they're drawn images, they're very much taking advantage of this. So even here, if we take this embrace, the theory would tell us we start somewhere here, okay? And then we would come around, we'd have this speech bubble, and even the angle in the speech bubble takes us to her happy face, and then we would read what he says. Okay, so we'd see the image and then we'd read. Now this one, regardless, this is so strongly motion horizontal that even if we start here, as soon as we get here, everything pushes us in this direction. She has the room, we want to know where she's going. The ducks are flying that way. The lines imply speed, that she's moving very well. She looks a little Zola Bud running with bare feet. So that's one theory of how we look at images. Then we have my theory, which is slightly different, and that is the idea that how we read tells us how we look at things, okay? And once again, I'll take these out. And the reason I'm showing you Chinese is because it is very interesting. For a Western person, okay, I would automatically read any of these images left to right. So when I read left to right, I read Shatin Rural Committee this way. So I say we read images in the same way. We would come into an image and we would read that way. Now, I asked many, many times, because I can read a few characters, but I don't really read Chinese, which way does it go? And the students would say, oh no, you read Chinese in the same direction. You would say, which is mostly the answer I got, but they would also say, you know, you read in the opposite direction. Now, I know two characters in this Chinese phrase, and those two characters are sa, tin, and that's actually the character for field. So there is Satin, Satin Rural Committee. And I also know this one down at the end. I call it the happy house, and that means group or committee. So clearly, this line is read in that direction. So this would be closer to reading Arabic. Now, I found Chinese students depended much more heavily on the centered version, where I am much more left to right, and I think you would be more right to left. But the thing is, Chinese can be read a multiple of ways. It's also read vertically. And in this case, this heading is actually read this way. These lines are read 1, 2, and 3. So for reading that, and as Chinese students did design and things like that, they were drawn by the most important parts of the composition and less by this reading thing. If you are fully versed in left to right English or some other European language, Western language, and you're fully engaged in Arabic, left to right, right to left, I'm terrible with that, okay? You probably have this same thing. You just kind of let a picture speak. But for somebody like me or somebody who's very sort of monolinguistic, you would read the picture the other way. So here's some other tools we use to look at a picture, okay? And a key one is the idea of thirds, that we can take any image and divide it into thirds. And by this method, okay, the middle is always a strong place, but it's hyper balanced and very stable and not as exciting. When we work with thirds, and we can twist it and look at it vertically, okay, the most exciting points are these intersections of the third. So the best place to put important things is on these intersections. And if we can do compositions, and I'll talk about this when I'm critiquing or giving you advice, if I say, you've created a nice diagonal, that would be if you had an object in this neighborhood, and if you had an important part of the picture in this neighborhood, their relationship is on the z-axis and it's horizontal. And that creates a nice dynamic, and it can work the other way as well. So let's look at some pictures and how this impacts some of those pictures. So, whoops. I'm switching here a little bit. So this is a photo where what you're going to see, okay, there's the photo. Now, the focus is in the front. This would be a better photo if the focus was in the back here. But what we see here on the thirds is there's very important information here, and that draws us into it. And the mistake I made in the photograph was that I put the focus in the front. It would be much nicer with the focus in the back, because this is a key important area, and it's right on that third line. Okay, so there it is. You can see, you see a face. And that's Gestalt at work. You take those objects and those clues and those hints, and we give it meaning. whether Gaudi meant that or not. Okay, so in the same way, we can look at horizon lines. Horizon lines in the center are really only valuable if there's a reflection. So if the top reflects in the bottom. Otherwise, a photograph, when there's a horizon like a landscape, is much better composed using the horizontal thirds. So this image, even though it's very gray, foggy Hong Kong day, okay, has two horizon lines. We have the horizon where the water meets the land, and we have the horizon where the mountains meet the sky. And in this case, the picture gets divided very nicely into those thirds. And so it gives it a nice balance. Whereas if this water line was in the middle, this mountain line would be pushed way to the top. Okay, so this emphasizes the land in the middle. So here once again is a horizon, and by putting the horizon at the lower third, at the bottom third, then you know that the sky is important. And in fact, the sky is important. That's where the color is. Okay, even this picture, which is a relatively boring picture, is divided nicely with the connections between the areas. And even here, where the trees or the land meets the sky, okay, that is near this upper third line that tells us the land, the bottom part of the photograph, is the most important part of that photograph. Okay, so then we move along. So here's how these thirds impact viewing people. Okay, so this guy looks kind of like me, apparently. This is my dad, and mashallah, he is still alive at 92 years old. But there he is. And what makes this picture strong is, remember, the importance of eyes is that his eyes are along that line. And by putting someone's eyes there, you will always get the headroom part right. You will always get the space nicely. If they are looking right into the camera, and actually anytime there's eyes, they should be at this upper third. And this will help any composition. If it was wider, if we could see more of his body, if we could see more of the environment, all those sorts of things. It's also nice use of depth of field because the background is out of focus, and we know exactly, I know I do that tooth grinding move all the time, okay? So here, picture of Cecilia that I like very much, but because her eyes are low, it's very centered and sort of oddly stable, but it's not the best version of this picture. Okay, I'm gonna skip that one. Okay, in this picture, what we can see is that he is looking to the side of the frame. Now, when he's looking to the side of the frame, then we use the vertical third lines, because what happens is he is looking straight across the frame. He would be better composed, okay, so his eyes are in the right place here, but he's too far to the left. So the smoke looks cool, the light looks cool, all that stuff, but this whole back part of this image, okay, is wasted space. Okay, it means nothing. The better image is here. Okay, if it was framed in this way, then it would be a better image, because that is called nose room, and it gives him room to look into. Okay, so here is one done. The balance is nice. He's not looking fully across, but he's looking partially across this way, and this gives him the room. Okay, so that's nose room. So when we see it, there it is. He's looking across, and he's coming across in that way. That balances the image. Okay, so here also, his eyes are close to that top third. The motion is this way. He's looking across the frame. So his position puts him there, and there's balance to it. It's the horizon line is not centered, his point of view is not centered, and there's lots of things going on in that one. Okay, the motion of the horse, once again, because the motion is there, this would be a better photograph, not centered, but if the horse was here. Okay, so there, it's not a horrible picture because of the motion. I actually did it on film, not on digital. But if we looked back a little more, if the horse had more room to run into, if the horse was here, it would give him lead room as he ran that way, or she. Okay, this one with the angle, that positioning is better because it's closer to straight on. Still might be a little better to the left. Okay, similar, this is a balance. The horse is looking at us, but Cecilia is looking to the left. So that makes it a little awkward, but you can see she's leaning into it. And ultimately, actually, her eyes are at the nice third point, so the other spacing is good. It's just Merlin is eyeballing us. Okay, so, okay. In the same way, so there are vectors that help us understand composition, and these vectors, they're graphic vectors, okay? So those graphic vectors, indeterminate, give us lines to look across. We follow them very naturally. This one we're not totally sure where to look, but those are the strongest vectors. That picture would be stronger if this intersection of vectors was over here on this third. It's a little more center than it ought to be, but it's not a totally horrible picture. Okay, the graphic vectors are on the z-axis, which makes them strong. It draws us in. You should never take photographs while you're driving, but I did. But you can see it's drawing it into the tunnel. And the thing is, we don't necessarily know if that's shot out of the back of the car or the front of the car, black and white. So it's indeterminate. We don't know the exact direction. So graphic vectors help us know where to look, but they don't always tell us direction. So here's just a whole bunch of them. Okay. And so these are lines that draw us into the image and cut the image and those sorts of things. Now here we're looking at index vectors, and actually it's their eyes that tell us where to look. Actually, Cecilia's eyes, Rochelle's eyes, and then there's even Rochelle's finger right here. So they are pointing exactly where we should be looking because they're all looking at the same place. So we start up here and we end up down there in the image. So, okay, same thing. The pool cue, his eyes are telling us that we're looking this way. That one, once again, if the frame was over a little bit, it'd be a little stronger because the balls would have a place to move to. Okay, this is one of my favorites. This has an index vector, which is the man's hand, bringing us across the image this way. And then this green is actually a motion vector, and the car motion brings us back. So what we end up doing is circling in this image, and it gives it a balance, and it makes it dynamic. And yes, this is from like 1981. That's how old this picture is. So it's like twice or three times older than you. But you can see the hand tells us where to look. The man's face draws us in. Then the hand points to the right, and the car brings us back into the left. We read the sign. We go back around the circle. Okay, same thing here. This is a motion vector. The movement of the horse draws us across the frame. We do know that it's moving, even though the motion is frozen. It's coming across. Okay. Here, the motion vector is more visible because of the blur. So the double-decker bus in downtown, in City of London, moving across that way, and this building that looks like a ship. Okay, so there we see the action. It does make it a better picture. I could see better composition. Okay, here even is the motion vector. the blur, the line. Okay, so I'm going to stop it there because there's some other things about angle of view and things like that. I will finish this on Wednesday, but I'm going to stop this and I'm going to post it so you can look at it if you want to sort of go over it again. And I'll be doing this lecture again in the other class. I'm also going to post that one. So I'll give you links to both of those. So maybe that one will be better, or I will use a different example. I don't know. So this includes Gestalt and the first part of composition. These are important things to know as you're deciding on the photograph you're going to use. Okay, so that is